We are beginning with slide number 19 within the chapter 34 PowerPoint. We were talking about the layers of the digestive tract before, and the muscular layer, called the muscularis, is composed of smooth muscle, different layers of smooth muscle that are arranged, like there's a longitudinal layer and a circular layer. And that's the arrangement of the smooth muscle layers enables for peristalsis, which are wave-like contractions that move food down the esophagus into the stomach. And then there's more peristalsis throughout the digestive tract as the food is moved along into the large intestine and then out the body. So this represents the esophagus, and this is the food bolus, and it's being moved along by peristalsis. And this movement would occur even if you were standing on your head. So if you were upside down, the food is going to go still toward your stomach no matter what, because of these waves called peristalsis. So few notes on the digestive tract. The central space of the digestive tract, as I told you before, is called the lumen. The four layers of the digestive tract wall are called the mucosa, and this is starting with the layer that is closest to the lumen. So the mucosa lines the lumen, and then the submucosa, muscularis, and serosa is the most external layer. Peristalsis is the wave-like contractions of two smooth muscle layers in the layer of the GI tract wall called the muscularis, and it causes the movement of the gut contents, which is going to be the bolus, or after it gets into the stomach, we now call it chyme, and then it's just called feces when it gets into the colon. So from the esophagus to the rectum, these movements are called peristalsis. And the serosa is part of the internal lining of the abdominal cavity called the peritoneum. So it's actually part of the serous membrane that lines the abdominal cavity. So the serosa, or the outside layer, is also part of the lining of the entire abdominal cavity. All right, the stomach. Let's move on and talk about the stomach. The stomach wall is folded. Those deep folds are called rugae, and you have more folds when the stomach is empty than when it fills. The folds kind of smooth out the more food that's in the stomach. And the stomach can hold approximately 1 liter of food. The epithelial lining of the stomach in the stomach mucosa has millions of gastric pits, which lead to gastric glands. And those gastric glands secrete hydrochloric acid and pepsin. The acid causes the stomach pH to be around 2, which is very, very acidic compared to the rest of body fluids, which are closer to 7, a little bit above 7, so slightly basic. And this stomach pH can kill bacteria in food. So that's one of the primary reasons for the hydrochloric acid being secreted, is to lower the pH, which helps to kill the bacteria that comes in with the food we eat. No matter how sterile or sanitary that we try to be when we prepare our food, we still take in a large number of bacteria, and especially if we eat out. So that's a good thing that our stomach pH is low. And then the stomach pH is also low because that activates the enzyme pepsin, which is an enzyme that breaks down protein into peptides, which are like chains of amino acids, but they're smaller chains than the original protein. So it helps to start the chemical breakdown of proteins. This is showing you the rugae that are found, the folding of the mucosa in the inner wall of the stomach, and then the gastric glands and what they look like in that mucosa. They're gastric pits that lead to gastric glands, and there are cells in those gastric glands that secrete mucus to help protect the stomach from its own enzymes and acid. And then there's cells that secrete acid and enzymes in those gastric glands. All right. The characteristics of the stomach: it is coated with a layer of mucus, coated with a layer of mucus that protects the stomach wall from the enzymes, because the stomach wall is also composed of protein. So if the pepsin were allowed to contact the tissues of our stomach, it could start, breaking down our stomach. And that would be bad. So that mucus protects our stomach from stomach ulcers, basically. Go down to the next line. When gastric acid leaks upward, the mucosal lining can be irritated, and that is called GERD, or gastrointestinal reflux disease, which can lead to acid reflux or heartburn. That's when the gastric acid leaks upward into the esophagus. So in the stomach, the food coming into the stomach was called a bolus, but now it's mixed with gastric juices, which are just a combination of fluids and enzymes and acid. Now it becomes chyme. Chyme is a mixture. And then the last thing I just want to make sure that I mention to you is the junction between the stomach and the small intestine is controlled by a sphincter. It's called the, pyloric sphincter. And it regulates it basically squirts chyme into the small intestine. So it regulates the entrance of chyme into the small intestine. The first segment of the small intestine is the duodenum, and that is the first segment. That's where the chyme enters from the stomach. Chyme mixes in the duodenum. The chyme mixes with secretions from the liver and pancreas. The liver produces bile, and that bile is also, excess bile is stored in the gallbladder. So bile helps to emulsify fats in the same way that dish detergent breaks down grease. It just breaks down large fat globules into smaller ones. So bile contains bile salts, which break up fat into fat droplets. And that process is called emulsification. So we say that bile emulsifies fats. So that's the role of the liver in digestion. It produces bile. The pancreas functions in digestion as an exocrine gland, and it secretes pancreatic juice, which is a fluid that contains a basic or alkaline secretion that helps neutralize the stomach acid, and also digestive enzymes. So all of these are secreted by the pancreas into the duodenum of the small intestine. Now the small intestine wall, the wall of the small intestine, the mucosa, is folded, and we call those folds villi. And what the villi do is increase the surface area so that more nutrients can be absorbed. And even the villi have even more folds on the surface of every one of those cells that line the small intestine, the inside of the small intestine. The cell surface is folded as well. So microvilli are microscopic folds, and villi are larger folds. But anyway, all of this combines to give you lots and lots of folding on the inner surface of the small intestine, and that increases the surface area for the absorption of nutrients. So more nutrients can be absorbed because of the villi and the microvilli. The digestive enzymes that are located on the inside surface of the small intestine that were released there by the pancreas are called brush border enzymes, because if you look at a microscopic image, the microvilli kind of look like the bristles of a brush. So they're called brush border enzymes. And then down here at the bottom, each villus, each fold in the small intestine, contains blood capillaries and a lymphatic capillary called a lacteal. And what happens is fats go into the lacteals and they're broken down more before they enter back into the veins, before they're absorbed back into the blood. So this shows you the folding of the small intestine, and each individual fold is called a villus. And then even those villi have microscopic folds on the surface here called microvilli. So each villus has its own capillary network and also a lacteal that runs through that villus that absorbs fats and helps carry those fats while they're being broken down until they're absorbed back into the bloodstream, reabsorbed into the bloodstream. All right, large intestine. So the large intestine includes the cecum, that's the beginning portion, and then the colon, the rectum, and the anus. The cecum has a small projection called the appendix, which functions in protection. It functions in the lymphatic system and the immune system. The function of the large intestine itself is you don't have digestion occurring there. The digestion, actually, chemical digestion occurs in the small intestine. But the large intestine absorbs water from the feces, so it compacts the feces. It absorbs salts and also some vitamins. And then it also functions to store undigestible material until it is eliminated as feces. The large intestine has a large population of bacteria. You've probably heard of E. coli, Escherichia coli. And those bacteria help break down the indigestible material. And also there are bacteria that produce vitamins like vitamin K. Vitamin K is needed for blood clotting. So we need those bacteria. The digestive waste or feces leave the body through the anus, which is the opening of the anal canal. So this is an image of the cecum of the large intestine, the beginning portion. This is where the small intestine and the large intestine meet, and this sphincter is called the ileocecal valve, and it regulates the entrance of chyme from the small intestine into the large intestine. And then the appendix, which is called the vermiform appendix, because vermiform means it's shaped like a worm. That's where the appendix is located, is attached to the cecum. All right, now we're going to talk about some of the accessory organs of digestion, beginning with the pancreas. I mentioned to you the exocrine function of the pancreas. So the exocrine cells of the pancreas secrete pancreatic juice and digestive enzymes. The pancreatic juice, in addition to just containing water, a watery solution, one of the main components of that pancreatic juice is sodium bicarbonate, which is the same chemical that we find in baking soda. It's going to be a basic compound that helps to neutralize the acid chyme from the stomach. A lot of people don't realize this, but most stomach ulcers are really duodenal ulcers because the chyme is so acidic that when it arrives in the duodenum, it tends to cause ulcers in the duodenum if it's too acidic and it's not neutralized like it should be. So that sodium bicarbonate helps to neutralize the acid chyme arriving from the stomach into the small intestine. Then the pancreas releases enzymes. One of those is amylase, and we've heard about amylase. There's salivary amylase that begins breaking down starch in our mouth as we chew our food. And then there's pancreatic amylase, which digests starch. There's more starch that arrives in our intestine that didn't get digested in our mouth. And so there's pancreatic amylase that digests the starch that's in our small intestine. Trypsin is an enzyme that continues the digestion of protein. Remember, the first enzyme for protein is pepsin, and it's in the stomach. And then we also have lipase, which digests fats or lipids. Oh, and then the endocrine function of the pancreas is related to digestion as well. So endocrine cells, remember, secrete hormones into the bloodstream. So there are two hormones that the pancreas secretes. They're insulin and glucagon. Insulin will help to lower blood glucose levels, and glucagon will help to raise blood glucose levels. Blood glucose levels are very, very important because glucose is needed by our tissue cells for cellular respiration, to be broken down for energy. So moving on to the liver, which is the largest gland in the body. In the liver, the blood moves, blood moves from the intestines to the liver via the hepatic portal vein. Hepatic refers to liver. So blood goes from the intestines to the liver via that hepatic portal vein, and then blood moves from the liver to the inferior vena cava and then to our heart via the hepatic veins. Functions of the liver. There are a huge number of functions of the liver. In fact, this is probably not a complete list, but we're going to start here in the next recording. So this is slide number 31.